engine is quite something, that V12. It's got a lot of things that are lacking in the 308. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode on the InfluEnzo, and today is about whether I bought the right Ferrari or the wrong one. My friend Fergus during lockdown also bought a cheap Ferrari, a lovely 456 in silver. Airbox cover on and the sound isn't that good, I'll take it off afterwards. But anyway, he bought that 456 for £3,000 more than I paid for this. So around the similar price really. He paid 37, I paid 34. And the 456 has long been one of my favourite Ferraris. I know it divides opinion. Oh, I think I've left the back open. Right, quickly stop. Does look like I have. Let's go and carry on. Anyway, the 456 is one of my all-time favourites. It does divide opinion, however. People either love them and think they look amazing, or think it's one of the ugliest Ferraris ever. But it's a fantastic Pininfarina design that was then copied wholesome by Peugeot when they did their 406 Coupe, or was it 405 Coupe? I think it just looks stunning, and the interior is really nice, and importantly it has a fabulous V12 in it. But first, an update on the InfluEnzo. My friend JM, have a look at his channel. You probably all know him already. His channel's quite a bit bigger than mine. He had a drive of it and he seemed to really like it. He did point out that the steering was a little bit soggy, and I checked the tyre pressures and one of the fronts was at 15 psi, so that probably explains the reason for that. But it must have a bit of a slow leak or a leaking valve or something like that, because it did go down significantly. The steering is pretty slow, and although it's feelsome and although the car turns quite neutrally as you would expect from a mid-engined car, steering probably isn't its best feature. The best feature is that gearbox. There isn't a millimetre of play there. It's solid, it's mechanical, it's amazing. The engine, likewise, as I've mentioned before, the sound to me is a little bit disappointing. I have learnt to like it, and I am on my process on the way of changing it in any case, but it is not the best thing really about this. The way it looks, of course, well, that's a whole different side to it. Most people, I think, would prefer a 308 and think it's a really iconic design to the 456. As I've mentioned, I myself love the 456, but that's not an opinion that is shared by everybody. I'm going to have a drive now in Fergus's car, and then afterwards we will reconvene back in the InfluEnzo on the way home. Wow! That engine is quite something, that V12. It's got a lot of things that are lacking in the 308, but it is very different. Throttle on this car is very heavy, which I guess suits it as a Grand Tourer, but it does make it feel a little bit more lethargic than it actually has a right to feel, because it's actually very good for such a big beast. It handles the twisties really well. Oh, touch down again. I always forget, Fergus did tell me about that. Right, got to watch out. So on dips it does tend to touch down if you're not careful. But when you get to an open bit of road and you put your foot down, it just keeps building and building and building. And the brakes, honestly, it is like, for me anyway, in the cars that I'm used to, it's like hitting a wall. It's absolutely fantastic. On a sweeping road like this as well, really, really good. The steering feels a little bit masked, so it's as if the feel just isn't coming through. I don't know if this was probably one of Ferrari's earlier assisted systems, and in that regard it isn't great, but Fergus said that there are things that you can do to improve that. Apparently it's just an electronic fix that gives it a little bit less assistance and a bit more weight. Fergus has changed the rims on this. I think they're from a 360, and at first I was a bit unsure, but the more I see them and the more I really like them and think they really suit the car. Chassis is really nicely controlled, damped and tied down. It resists understeer pretty well really for a big barge. Does make the little InfluEnzo feel like it's all over the place in those regards. Then again, the InfluEnzo probably needs some new dampers and maybe some bushes. I can see why, you know, this would be a great touring car. But Ferrari has managed within that, although there is the comfort, there is the long-legged ability, it has managed to keep the engagement and the fun. The steering would probably be my only criticism that could do with being a little bit better. But for the rest of it, the engine is epic, and what a soundtrack, and it handles well, and it's fun to barrel down even these sort of like little British B roads. It can handle it, and it's no slouch. Much less delicate car really this than the 308. In the way you drive it as well, you have to grab this by the scruff of the neck and just use a bit of force and really sort of just bully it into corners, and then it works a lot better. It's a very different car, which is no surprise really. Stupid statement of the month, but I did think it was the kind of car that would respond to a gentle touch. That's what I thought instinctively, but it's quite the opposite. Really responds from driving it a bit more like a brute, which definitely doesn't work with the 308. Well, I think there's about 20 years of development between this and the InfluEnzo, and you can feel it really. Epic. Feels like a turbine. When they first came out, I think they were well received, but if you look at what was there before, so the previous Ferrari four-seaters weren't exactly beauties or brilliant cars. The 400 series has come into its own in some ways as an object of cool, but it was never a brilliant car. And this certainly, when it came out, it was a big step forward for Ferrari. It was actually a good car. Apparently, if you keep on top of them, they're not too hideously expensive to maintain either, although I wonder how much truth there is in that. Certainly I know from Fergus that it drinks. I mean, I think he gets about 150 miles to a tank, and a tank, it's 100 quid to fill, so I don't know how many litres that is, but I really think that having a slightly lighter throttle would transform the car. I know it's a tourer, but a little bit less weight and a little bit more responsiveness on the throttle, and it would really make it perfect in my view. Okay, we're going to get back in the InfluEnzo now for some closing thoughts. Well, it feels like I'm back home again, and it is amazing to drive another car back to back with one of your own cars, just to bring out some of the things that you hadn't realized. So for example, an unassisted, unpolluted system in terms of steering, it makes a massive difference, but it's so much easier to appreciate that and feel that when you get in from another car where which has power steering, the 456, and it doesn't feel quite so natural. It really highlights how nice this steering is. So everything is just immediate, and now it really brings to mind what James said, JM, who did a review on this car last week. about how it feels like a little Elise in some ways. It actually does in some ways, especially after having driven like a big car like the 456. Other things are just how unpolluted the driving experience is. The chassis, especially maybe on this particular car, it might need a little bit of work, may not be the best thing. It may not be the best handling car on earth. But the immediacy of all the controls and how tied in you feel with the car just makes up for it. The other thing is, with regard to the 456, is that this is a relatively simple car, and part of the process of bonding with it has been all the work that I have done with it. And that just wouldn't be possible. That 456 just scares me shitless, really, in terms of having to start delving into the guts of that V12 or the electronics, all the stuff that I don't understand. This, in terms of complexity, sort of 80s cars are pretty much as far as you want to go, in my view, unless you are an electronic genius, which I am not. So on the whole, really like it. Very nice car, the 456. And you know what? You can really make it dance. You have to like get it by the scruff of the neck and you have to manhandle it, but it really is quite playful. And the InfluEnzo is different. It needs to be treated with a little bit of delicacy. Did I pick the right car? Well, I didn't know about the 456 at the time, but I am very happy with my choice, and I'm sure that Fergus is equally happy with his, and I can see why. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode on the glorious InfluEnzo. Please do subscribe, and I will see you for the next video.